free across so that they can actually find a seat when they arrive. Sorry, we've packed you in like pre-COVID times. Luckily, we're one of the last places, last bastions of health here, I think. Yeah. I hope you haven't all come from Sydney. I'm locking down Sydney area. Now we will be receiving our friends on Zoom any second now. And in fact, I think they've arrived. Hello to the people who are arriving from Zoom. I think there's just one more I'll let in. Great. So welcome to the Zoom people. Fantastic to see you all here. We have a massive crowd here at Avid Reader today, so it's very exciting to see you all here. I'll make a start, I think, even though we have a few final people heading through. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on here. In this area, the Yagara and the Turrbal people, and I'd like to pay my deepest respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and to any other elders or Aboriginal people who are here today. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land, and sovereignty was never ceded. Stolen land that we're meeting on was storytelling land for over 60,000 years, so an incredibly fine tradition to have a bookshop and a reading series on. And tonight we have a particularly interesting event, because we normally have events that feature an author who's written a book, and that book is for sale at the counter. But today what we have for sale at the counter is a book that has inspired this talk. So Wilding, which inspired this talk, is available at the counter, and after this event you'll probably know a bit more about it and be excited about purchasing a copy. So that is at the counter tonight. I'm just going to let a few more people in because there's people arriving on Zoom. Excellent to see everyone arriving. Welcome to the people who have just arrived on Zoom. So for the people on Zoom who are arriving, you will be on silent for the duration of the event tonight, but there is a chat function. And what I'd like to do is to get people to put their comments or their questions in via chat, and then I can pass those on when you arrive. So feel free to use the chat function, and if you do want to purchase the book, of course, a link will be coming through, which will also show you where the chat function is. So that link will lead you to the book of the moment, Wilding. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Ed Attard, who has been teaching environmental studies and conservation at the University of Queensland. He worked for Queensland's Environmental Protection Agency and is a keen bird watcher. Travelling overseas, he has written and filmed successful conservation projects from around the world, and he is a very long-time avid reader. So everybody welcome Ed Attard.
Thank you very much, Chrissy, and a big thanks to Avid Reader, because a lot of us work at uni and we can see the links being cut day by day with overseas groups and lecturers and friends, and thank goodness we've got community here and try and fill in some of those gaps and holes, because the international community is really important to us. And that's a nice segue, because I wanted to acknowledge some of the people on Zoom who are linking up with us. One of them is Mel Galbraith, who's a senior lecturer in applied ecology at Unitec Institute of Technology, Auckland. But for me, most important, she's been involved with one of the most remarkable conservation projects in New Zealand called Tiri Tiri Matangi. And I've put that up on a slide at the end so people can photograph and they can have a look at their leisure on Google. And I've been to Tiri Tiri twice, and it's just a remarkable piece. And it's done by the community. So that's the other thing. It's a lot of this isn't government. A lot of this is also us, the people, getting active and involved. So welcome, Mel. Thank you very much for joining us from Auckland. I can see her waving. That's fantastic. Yeah. Oh, extra special for me up here. Lee Kui Min may have had problems with the internet. He may be on with us. He was my bird guide in Vietnam. and Vietnam has some conservation issues, but he's a wonderful conservationist and guide and does work in the conventions around Southeast Asia to try and protect their wildlife and birds. And I'll put a reference to him up there as well. Misanobu was my star student, and she's zooming us here as well. So there's Nisa, she's in Japan. So it's really lovely to have her connecting with us. And Yumi Matsutumi, who was one of the lecturers I met there as well. We sorely miss those links and, curse on our government and on our universities for thinking that it's easy to just shut down departments, and how are we going to have links with Southeast Asia and the rest of the world if we don't have them through the university, But anyhow, we go on. And then Yumi Matsutumi works at Kyosho University at the School of Engineering. So I'm really pleased to have them. Now, the other Zoom people, I didn't get names. I wasn't able to get names for you. So can you please send messages to us and tell us where you're messaging us from, and that would be really nice to know who contacted us, and the truly international nature of conservation. Now, before I start, I'll just say conservation's been sort of on the back burner if you're in the government, and with our government probably invisible. I think they erased it, but it's now centre, and really it should be on the front foot, and it is starting to be on the front foot. And you'll see some of the reasons in this PowerPoint about this example from the UK, because it's not just about does David Attenborough photograph a lovely pretty bird. It's a lot more than that. And so conservation, at the end of this talk, I think all of us will have a more concrete idea of what conservation really means. And all of us can take that away with us and try and influence and spread the word and make people realize it's a fundamental issue for us here and our survival. And particularly for young people, if they are going to have any hope, I think one of the figures for one conference recently, 70% of young people said they had a pessimistic view of the future. So if we're going to change that, we're going to have to make sure we're on the front foot on conservation and on land use. So I'm so happy that you came. A lot of friends here, and you probably got the reason why I felt it was important to show this, and again, thanks to Avid. So I'll get started. Timekeeping is my worst skill, as Kath will tell you. My dear wife. You don't have to agree with me. Surely not. Okay, so let's get started. Some of you may know this one. Some of you can tell me what bird this is. Okay, I might pause in there. Everyone know? Yeah, nightingale. So, yeah. Iconic species of the UK. Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, Keats, Byron, all wrote sonnets about this. And the reason why is this is really a harbinger of the summer. So those of us that have lived in England, there's a few of us here, you know how desperately we look forward to spring and warm weather. And this one flies all the way over from Africa, crosses the Sahara Desert, tiny little, 1.5 ounces or whatever it is, and then eventually makes it to Europe. I think, yeah, and to the UK. So this is one of the birds we're going to look at a little bit, not in too much detail, but, and another one is, there we go. Let's have a look down here. Ooh. Glasses. That's even better. Oops.
Click on the red bit.
There we are. I think that's happening. If anyone wants dental help.
Bristle bird. Eastern bristle bird.
Oh, here we go.
I reckon it's a turtle. Oh, yeah.
Okay, I think that's enough of that one too. That one is, and again another iconic species, harbinger of summer for English people, and comes from Africa again, flies over the Sahara, goes into Europe, and can you hear me now? So it's another one that's a symbol really of our spring and summer. Now let's go back here. Okay. Right. Get rid of these. There's bank details on here, so don't take any notes. Okay, and I think okay, let's go in. Okay, so here they are, the nightingale and the turtle dove. So why did I put these on this screen? Well, there's a couple of reasons why these two end up being very important. The turtle dove, for example, there's only 5,000 pairs left in Britain. So that's less than the population of West End by a long chalk. 200 pairs in Sussex, which is a small county in England, but it's where the farm, Knepp, the farm we're going to look at. And Knepp may be the only place in Britain where their numbers have increased. Now, the turtle dove, they did a census in 1999. That's not that long ago. And then they did a census last year, and it's dropped by 93% in 17 years. So something's happening. It's cataclysmic, drop. The nightingales between 1967 and 2007, the number of nightingales in the UK fell by 91%. So when I was a youngster wandering through Richmond Park, there probably were nightingales there. And now if I went back, there'd be one where there used to be 10. So this is again a cataclysmic drop. Eventually both these species will be gone out of England. They're still in Europe. They're hanging on in Europe, and in England, they're going to be gone. But that's only the tip of the iceberg. We'll talk a little bit more about what's happening and why. So between 1967 and 2000, we've got this drop. And for every 10 birds that were singing when I was a child, there is now only one. One of the reasons, yeah, this word industrialisation, we know because of factories. You know, we live in big cities, we've industrialised, particularly the UK, way back in 1780s or whatever, but they've industrialised agriculture too. And since the Second World War, there was an escalation in clearing the land and intensifying crop production. And I mean, most of you probably guess why in the Second World War accelerated. Yeah, providing food because of the blockade during the war, you know, obviously from Europe. But that intensification of farming carried on with subsidies, so that poor land, people were willing to pay a lot of money and put a lot of money in to get a crop out, even though the land was really poor. So this, as you can see here, there's not much place for a bird to nest or breed, let alone feed. And then you've got insecticide and herbicides and fertilizers being pumped into the system as well. So what are you going to do about it? So this is interesting because this crisis was a financial crisis as well as a biological crisis. And farmers, even though they ploughed huge amounts of money into their land, often were not making a profit. It depended on the area you were. And this family here, Isabella Tree and Charlie Burrell, left industrial scale farming to rewild their land. They made the decision, we're getting out of crop raising. So in December 2002, Charlie sends the Department for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs a letter of intent to establish a biodiverse wilderness area in the low weald of Sussex. But that's all well and good, but how are they going to do it? How are they going to rewild the land? So one of the things is they had ideas from other places where they'd already done it. And this is where I practice my terrible Dutch. The Dutch ecologist Frans Vera, and we've got friends of ours, Johannes is here. Yes. Hey, up the back. And she knows this area of land in Holland because it's only, what, 40 kilometers from Amsterdam?
Everything is about 40.
True. Yeah, that's right. So Frans Vera had a theory. And his theory was that Europe wasn't like we imagined it before humans came, where it was just covered in forest from top to bottom. There was an old, saying that a squirrel could jump from one tree to another and go from the bottom of England to the top of Scotland. Well, that theory, they believe, is not quite correct. And they believe that England had large herbivores, and these herbivores created patches in the landscape, a little bit like in Australia the Aborigines do with their fire burning. But so he put this theory to the test in terms of how they were going to rejuvenate and rewild the land. The NEP project, originally wilderness project of Oostvaardersplassen, half an hour from Amsterdam in Holland. Yeah, and they got advice and experience from there. And what did they do? Well, they imagined that at the time where, if you look at this top picture here, that animal is now extinct and it's called an auroch, but it's the actual origin of the cow. And of course, most animals that we have came from a wild, origin. The wild horses roamed in Europe too, and they were called tarpan. And we still have some tarpan, they're not extinct. And of course, people from Sweden, there's Tom's here, he'll know about this one, which is the elk. We still have those. And luckily, hanging on by dear life, we have the European bison, which is called the wison. So these animals roamed around all of Europe and created a lot of munchy and pissing here and eating here and doing all sorts of stuff. And they all eat differently. They eat different plants and they create their own biosphere. And so the idea was in NEP, well, let's give it a go. We'll bring the animals back and see what happens. Let nature take its course. So they brought fallow deer. I know these deer because I live next to Richmond Park, in only 60 kilometres from NEP, and we had these deer here, there, and they brought the deer back, the fallow deer. They brought back Exmoor ponies, because Exmoor ponies are probably the closest you'll get to the wild, horses that they used to have before. And of course, pigs. And in Europe, they have the wild boar. But in England, you can't reintroduce the wild boar. It's not legal. So they introduced the closest they could, which was the lovely Tamworth pig, a suitable alternative to the wild boar introduced in December 2004. So they introduced these animals onto the land, and then they tried to see, well, let's see what's happening. Longhorn cattle and fallow deer in different parts of the land, and look what happened. On the left was the nice, neat English countryside that we so dearly love, but on the right was what the land would look like and became once you let the animals roam, doing their pissing and their eating and all the rest of it, and letting the shrubs grow up, and it became a different habitat altogether.
How big was it?
Their acres is 1,300 acres. It's not much. It's only 7.5 kilometres long. So this is not a big block of land. And I'll talk to you a little bit about that later too, because that's actually quite significant. So that's what happened to the land. That's NEP there. They divided the block into 3 parts and put deer and pigs here, fenced it all off so that the neighbouring farmers wouldn't shoot you. You can imagine some of the neighbouring farmers weren't that happy. It looked so untidy. But it's not huge. And then they had these 3 different areas where they put different animals, and then they looked and see what happened to the land. So this is all between 2000 and the present day. So 2000 to 2022. So we're looking at only 20 years, really. And the changes were just remarkable and so quick. This is a symbol of English woodland, the great oak, the ancient oak, which is found in Europe too. And it's a source of individual ecosystem for a multitude of organisms. So when you start looking at these things, you find out it's got its own caterpillar, its own fungus. It's got a fungus for when it's young and a different fungus when it's old. It's a whole habitat and ecology. And it feeds so many different animals. The acorns are eaten by wild boar, by squirrels, by birds. Some of the birds pick the seed and plant them and then they grow up. So, but these old oaks are rare in England now, and a lot of them are dying because they're over ploughing and over fertilizing and over spraying the land. So this is an iconic thing, just like the birds, but they're also under threat because of industrialized farming practices. So the Burrells looked after their oak trees, and nature helped them out. Because one of the things people say is when herbivores go and eat, they often eat the young trees. So you think, oh my God, poor old oak, he's never going to have a chance to get up because the cows or the deer will come and eat him. Well, they found out nature has its own solutions, because this is a thorn bush, and in the middle of the thorn bush is a young oak tree growing up under the thorn bush. So thorn bush with herbivores, nature has a way of generating a new forest. Absolutely. So they were discovering things all the time. Things were happening and they were discovering new things all the time. Waterways, this is a big story. The UK spends $1.2 billion a year on flood damage. In 2013, they spent 5.8 billion on flood damage. And guess what? With climate change, the floods are getting more frequent and bigger. And what's happening with the rivers in the UK, they've been industrialized too. So they can't meander and go over the fields. Oh no, you don't want the water on the fields. So they put them in tight channels, you know, and they put weirs in there and they narrow them. And what happens when you get a flood? It's massive. The water pumps through, you know, however many kilometers an hour and cubic meters an hour, and it doesn't have a place where it can lay and rest. So they have a small part of the River Arder, and the River Arder, they've allowed it to regenerate, rewild the river. So they've rewilded the river too, and guess what? The village down the way doesn't get flooded. Not only that, and this has got major implications for UK policymakers and for us in general, how we look at our rivers, is the biodiversity has come back absolutely unbelievable, you know, biodiversity. The vole, which is the lovely little animal that I used to read in Wind in the Willows. Anybody read Wind in the Willows here? You remember vole? Well, little vole has declined by something like 97%. So these species are also part of our culture, and we're going to lose them. So the person reading the book Wind in the Willows in England in another 10 years' time, well, you can forget about going to see Mr. Vole because he's gone. So on Knepp, the voles have come back. You know, there's habitat for them, places for them to hide. You know, the nature is providing the ability for them to exist. You know, so this.
So are there any other Wind in the Willow animals?
Yeah, well, I think the trouble is, you know, you look at so many species, and there's badger, and there's mole, and there's toad, yeah. But anyhow, so I love this picture. I thought I'll go and have a picnic there when I go. Now this one's interesting because, as I said, it goes to so many different layers, and probably one of the most fundamental layers is this one. And we got a lovely quote by Franklin D. Roosevelt. You all know him, lovely man. The nation that destroys its soils destroys itself. There are approximately 60 to 80 crops, harvests. They've done the UN and the scientists have done a survey of soils, and they estimate there is between 60 and 80 harvests of soils under the current plant use. So when I said this goes much further, conservation is now a front foot issue for all of us and the next generation, because if we want any food, viable food production, we do have to think about conservation. And what they found out in Knepp, there was a lovely thing. He sent a letter to all the state governors, Mr. Trump, on Uniform Soil Conservation Law, 1937. Remember Grapes of Wrath and the sandstorm covering the houses. You know, we know nature can really, we can really wreck nature in so many ways. What water and soils have been revitalized in Knepp since the old industrial farming has been replaced by a kinder, more balanced use of the land. So studies by Imperial College, which is, one of our most prestigious colleges in London, identify 19 species of earthworm at Knepp, indicating a marked improvement in soil structure and function compared with neighbouring farms. So they're already ahead of the other farms in the area. They've got worms, and they've got lots of different kinds of worms. You know, it's all fundamental stuff, but it's coming from quite a low, dangerous point in the UK, probably for all of us. But it's definitely there for the taking. What else has come back? Insects. 80% of insects in Europe gone. It's a horrendous figure. We picked up their journals about a year ago and found out how many insects they've lost in Europe. And I think Germany, Bavaria has now regulated for a certain percentage of farms to be organic, just to make sure we got the insects. And if anyone says, oh, I don't like insects, well, don't eat honey, don't eat half your larder, because it all comes from pollination. So, you know, as I said, we have to be on the front foot on conservation because it's basically our survival. So Dave Goulson of Sussex, the scientists have been going mad. They go down to Knepp and they just go ballistic. They're finding species that are rare, that haven't been there for years. So they go down, they recorded 62 species of bee and 30 species of wasp at Knepp, including 7 bee and 4 wasp species of national conservation importance in this tiny little farm, you know. So it's a real guiding line. And what else is important? Oh, I definitely agree with this one. Yeah, absolutely. They've got somewhere to take people to show them what can be done. It's not in their mind. It's not imaginary. Oh, I love this. It's real. It's there. They can see it. You know, it's not a dream. It's just implementation. I think we're in that position in a lot of things at the moment. It's really about implementation. Let's have a look here. I never thought I'd say safaris in England, but another way. Yeah, so again, education, you know, blah, blah. It's all part of it as well. Okay, let me keep going. So what are the successes in Knepp? They're absolutely phenomenal. Well, I get excited. I get goose pimples. First white storks to nest in the UK since the Middle Ages. So we got our friends Anne and others from the Mediterranean. We see the storks on the housetops. But in England, they haven't been there since the Middle Ages, and now they're nesting on that. So it's a spectacular sign of success. One of our favourite birds, me and Kath, we love owls. And in Knepp, they've got all 5 species. Okay, I know Gary will know the answer to this. Which one do we have in Australia? Which one?
Gary.
What's an owl?
No. Out of these ones. Which
Barn owl.
barn owl. Thank you. Thank you, barn owl. Yeah, the barn owl, that one. Yeah, that one.
How did it end up in Australia?
No, I don't know. I'll move on. I'll move on quickly because I've got a tiny 4-minute film clip of the owner talking about this, which I think you really should see. But these are some of the other species that they're all getting excited about. Butterfly fanatics in England go to Knepp on special tours because that purple emperor there is a really rare butterfly and it's found in Knepp in good numbers. The bats, 13 out of UK 17 bat species are now found in Knepp, feasting on our huge populations of insects. So as I said, you got that lovely stuff, you know, pony poo, and then you got the beetles, and then you got the bats coming down and eating the beetles, and then you got the owls eating the beetles. So you know the whole thing has generated layers and layers of things. Yeah. So our huge population of insects. Bechstein's bat, a species associated with old growth broadleaf woodland, is rare throughout Europe. So if we get rid of our old growth, we're fighting for old growth forest in Tassie. It's a big one in Tassie, and you can see why. When you look at these things, you can understand why this thing, old growth, it means that the tree is mature enough to provide the whole ecology. So you knock out all these big trees, you knock out this, you know, wonderful mosaic of ecology, their own ecosystems. And of course, they're interrelated. Do you know that one, Gary? Haha, poor, I'm picking on him. Yeah, let's a spot. Well done.
I got that.
And Dunbeat. Yeah, the other one on the right. Stoke. Yeah, Stoke.
You wrote it on the slide.
Oh, yeah. I didn't want to make it too easy. Now, the economies, you know, you hear people like, you know, I don't want to name people, but they over here they talk about, oh, you know, we need to keep this industry or that industry, you know, and nature, or, you know, but dung beetles are estimated to save the British cattle industry 367 million a year simply by encouraging the growth of healthy grass. So, you know, it's counterproductive. You over-utilize the land and you have to pay more for machinery, more for insecticide, and they've proved it. They've proved it. It's a no-go. Yeah, thank you for listening. Oh, I'm not too bad. I'm doing reasonable time here. Bird on the right. Anyone? Come on. Yes. Well done. European or Eurasian kingfisher. Yeah. This is Isabella Tree here. She's the wonderful writer of the book, and anyone who wants to go and have a look through this, the book's good. You know, I really enjoyed it. She, as I said, she managed to get the science, the narrative, and everything in the book really well. And I wanted to add, before I forget, that I view these presentations in the way that we are a family, us lot, and our understanding of conservation maybe we've just increased a little bit or widened it. And I think it's really important because we'll be very clear about how we, you know, progress forward, how we view these issues with our friends and family and kids or whatever, and get a clarity of view, because these things are accelerating in the UK now. There's a landholder in the UK that owns 2% of all the land in the UK. Does anyone know who it is? Yeah, the Queen. And they've gone to the royal family and they put a proposal to rewild the land. Good old Charlie, come on, come good now. Yes, yes, right. So, but there are other rewilding places in and around England, and the people are really great. One of them's a very good writer. He's from the Lake District as well. Actually, Kath, do you remember his name? The guy from the Lake District who... James Rebanks, yes, another great writer, and a great... He's up in the north. Now, if you want to see this, it's really easy and entertaining and get a lot more out of it. You can just Google NEP Conservation Project, Rewilding NEP videos, and they've got great videos. Absolutely fantastic, really concise, really interesting. They talk about what they're doing. And very briefly, I will say that both Charlie Burrell and the writer Isabella Tree, who's his wife, both of them are working very hard around the UK, encouraging the reintroduction of the beaver. It's already been reintroduced in the southwest, down in Devon, Cornwall, and it's been reintroduced up in Scotland. So there is movement happening now to try and recalibrate and reorganize our use of land. So for us here in Australia, same issue. How do we use the land? What's the best way to go forward? You know, these are questions that we can deal with. And there are people here in the audience I'd love to introduce you to, so that if anybody is interested in a certain area, they'll be, you know, they might like to do that. Now, before I go on to that, these are some of the websites. I'll put this back up, and if you want to photograph it, you can have lots of fun with these. The two at the bottom are the ones that I've written about or filmed. So Tiri Tiri Matangi is amazing. It's the one in New Zealand, in Auckland. They brought back the birds. It was all community done. Absolutely amazing. Has anyone else been here to Tiri? Yeah, okay. Well, you know what it's like. It's paradise. It's fantastic. So the other one we did with Karen, myself, and Tom. I brought film back from Argentina, and we filmed one on a big scale. This is small, but the one in Argentina is over 700,000 hectares. And last year they brought back the jaguar. Yeah, so they brought back all the other animals: peccary, tapir, maned wolf, giant anteater, giant otter. They're all brought back. And the one in Argentina is the biggest rewilding. That one is the biggest rewilding in the whole of the Americas. So there's a lot of good things to give to our next generation. There's a lot of hope. And, you know, if we can put conservation on the front foot, I think that's really a good idea. That's my idea. I think it's a good idea. Yay! Yay! Anyhow, so now another technical feat. I'll give you a short clip with hopefully Charlie Burrell. That's right. I need to go to. I'll get rid of that one. Yeah. And where are we? Let's go to. And we got a short clip here with someone who's a little bit more articulate than me. Now I need to go to. Okay.
We know that there's maybe 60 years of harvest left on the planet in the conventional farming systems. Could we look at something else? Could we look at some way of looking at this landscape in a different way? Something that we could, you know, enhance it and feel proud about it. What about making it wild again? Isn't that exciting? The sort of land we're on is very heavy clay. It's the soil that is very, very difficult to farm commercially. Out of the 17 years that I was farming the land conventionally, we did make a couple of years profit. When you're using fungicides or using herbicides or using pesticides on the land, and your soil is dead. It's just dirt. Once we were going from conventional farming to the rewilded landscape, where you're a bit nervous about how you're going to make your money, how it's going to work. But there is no inputs, there's no grain, there is nothing being bought in. So the cost of production just drops away. I know that the production isn't huge, but it's what the land can sustain. It's what is able to live all year round without any supplementary feeding. And you've got these once domesticated animals now becoming more and more in tune with the landscape and living off that landscape without human intervention. The longhorn cattle, the Exmoor ponies, and then you've got your deer and your Tamworth pigs. When you've got all these animals running around in this sort of landscape, it begins to feel like scrubland in Africa. So when you see your longhorn, it doesn't look like a domesticated animal anymore, because what your mind is saying, there is an animal in scrubland and it's wild. when you go out at dawn, you can feel your chest vibrating with the sheer volume of noise. I had never experienced any of that. That was the big difference. It was that noise, that vibrant noise created by all this life that I had absolutely no idea my land could feel and behave like that. It's been this huge wave of interest. Everyone wants to feel that it's possible to do something. And if you've got a real hope story that you can transform an agricultural desert into something which is very rich and biodiverse, it becomes all possible and something that you can do. We're on a crest of a wave and it's all beginning to feel like it's got a real momentum behind it.
Lovely. Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah.
Do they harvest those cattle?
They do indeed. He's got veterinarians permanently, he's got veterinarians permanently on the land, monitoring the different animals, their health and age or whatever, and they cull all the animals. One of the issues, I know Joanna may know about this from Holland, is that in the Oostvaardersplassen, the one in Holland, of course they're learning from their mistakes all the time, but they had 3 or 4 really good years of mild winters, and then the population of the animals went through the roof, and then they had a really severe Arctic Siberian type of winter, and these animals are starving and dying. So they don't go down that path in NEP. They cull the animals and they get good money for them because they get organic. The economic model is very savvy because they've got properties there and they rent those properties out as well, so people can rent them out. And they've got camping there and they've got the tours, you know, they've got a whole host of things that they said they bring more income in from the meat than they did when they were doing all that millions of dollars worth of machinery, and they started producing their own ice cream and blah, 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 and they still couldn't make money. And then with this cattle and horses and pigs and sold as organic meat. And it made me think, I'm not an expert on land use, but it made me think you have to look very carefully at how we use land. The figures in Europe are that 30% of land in Europe is no longer viable for agriculture. They're not using it for abandoned. And there's a possibility that some of those pieces of land can then be used as rewilding. And there's lots of ones, you'll find them on Google. It's great fun. On a rainy day, never mind. But they've got bison going to Spain. They've got the lynx reintroduced. They've got wolves in certain areas. You've got bears. I mean, Italy's a remarkable place because they've managed to hang on the bears and the wolves there. They're only about 100 kilometres from Rome, and they've still got wild bears and wolves. So it's this really interesting, you know, place we're at now. The other thing is the United Nations, and the United Nations are calling for a real look at habitat loss, and not habitat loss, but extinction. They're really looking at it, and they're saying that we want to have a target of 30% of all land to be wilderness. So that brings me back to NEP, because obviously what NEP are doing is they're linking up with other farms and other places. And there's good news and bad news. The good news is they are linking up with other wilderness areas. The bad news is just north of NEP, adjacent land, the council wants to build 1,300 homes. So, you know, we've got the ongoing battle, but we're working on a much firmer foothold now because we've got some idea that this extinction crisis is not just this massive dark cloud over us. It's also we can actually do something. We can, and we can do it in Australia. We can do it in other countries. It's that implementation, and that's why I think the book and NEP is so important because they proved it. They proved it. It can be done.
Got a couple of Zoom questions.
Great.
So one of them is, can we get that the information that was on that slide? The Zoomers couldn't really see it, so we'll send it to Zoom if I can get that off you. So for
No
everyone
problem.
on Zoom,
Yeah.
I'll send that out
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah.
The question that has come from Kirsty Turnbull from Tasmania is very hard to see, but it's if it's not already happening, are there any plans to explore how food production, i.e. integrating the human element, might become part of NEP's project, or is it purely intended for conservation?
Yeah, that's a really good question because you can't separate economics from a lot of things. You know, you've got to be viable as a farm or have an income, and the answer to that, as much as I know about it with NEP, was diversification, organic food, specialization, and I think the key thing was find out what your land is best used for. Is it any good as a crop farm? No. Is it any good as a cattle or sheep farm? Yeah. Well, or does it need to be integrated? I think that's what they've done. So that's a really good question because that economic question about food production is really good. And the other thing is farmers in the UK, not only farmers in the UK, oh, our land is there to produce food. We can't rewild it. So Isabella talks about that in really good detail in the book because she said, for example, 40% of all the food we produce is wasted. Mm-hmm. And she quotes going through the US, fields upon fields of capsicums and have been rejected by Woolworths or and they just go to waste. Kilometres and kilometres of food go to waste. And then in poorer countries, food doesn't get to the place because of infrastructure problems. So our planet can actually provide a lot of food to people, and we're just really missing the shots on this one.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions from the audience here? Yeah.
Ask a question.
Yeah.
Why can't the wild boar be reintroduced into England or to Britain?
Yeah, well, wild boar, I think, are considered a dangerous animal because mind you, saying that, they've got them in Italy and they've got them in France and they've got them in Spain. You know, yeah. I'm not 100, and again, I'm not 100% sure the whole reason. It may also be. There are sometimes issues, I think, with cross infection. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I'm not that well up on some of the farming practices. Yeah, but I think that's one of the reasons. But they're making headway, and I think they will probably eventually, you know, have a lot of these animals reintroduced. Beaver's already well on the way now in England to be reintroduced. Yeah. Ah, yes. Oh. Back first and then front, yeah.
Red squirrel.
Ah,
are they having any success?
Good news there too. I've been doing my reading, and with getting proper land use. For example, England's got the lowest highland forest coverage. Why? Because huge areas of English moorland have been created so that the aristocracy can go and shoot a few pheasants. Yeah, so England's got the lowest forest cover. Now in Scotland, where they've rewilded, and in some other areas, the beautiful Scots pine grows, which is just the most beautiful pine tree, and of course red squirrel love it. So you know, there's some habitat changes. Another interesting thing that came out of the book is we always think that cats are a problem only in Australia because it's a feral pest. Well, cats are having devastating effect in England because there's so many more of them, and the habitat's gone for the small birds. So you know, this unbalancing of nature has devastating effects, you know, on different things. Oh, yes, yeah, well, that's right, sorry.
I was just going to ask if you know anywhere in Australia that it's happening or could be happening or would be good to be happening.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I might have got this one. I asked, okay, now let me just get this one back on board. Where are we? There we go, escape. So I'll get that one over there and better go back to, whoops. There she goes, and view full page. My anxiety levels are always the highest when it comes to technology. Here we go. Look, these are some. Can you see these ones?
You do this for Zoom, actually.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Oh, no.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Didn't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, from here.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I'll leave this up. I didn't give my, but I've got a board here. So if anybody wants the PowerPoint presentation, I'm very happy to send it to you. I feel like we should all be teachers, go out there and do it. But these are just a few. Land for Wildlife, South East Queensland, York Peninsula, Rewilding Project, Arid Recovery, Australian Wildlife Conservancy, Macquarie Island Pest Eradication. That is amazing. Some of the island work is just amazing. They got rid of all the rats. You know, they really did a good job. Got rid of rabbits in one of them. I think Macquarie Island was rabbits. Was a problem. Yeah. Yeah, Dirk Hart, Tog Island. My dear friend Deb's from Land for Wildlife. She sent me this, God bless her. So I put these up. And Rewilding Europe. You know Tim Flannery? His book on Europe is great. And he talks about rewilding in Europe as well. So Tim Flannery.
Yeah. There's that book, was it The Call of the Breed Warbler?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's another.
Massey? I think it's Massey.
Yeah.
Can I
Yeah.
add, there's a place called Arkabar in South Australia. It's about 4 hours north of Adelaide. So it's just south of Wilpura Pound. It was an old cattle station and they've gotten rid of all the cattle and let it wild. And all the birds have come back within 20 years.
Oh, great. Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, that's really good, isn't it? Yeah. I was going to say we'll have time after this finishes at 7:30 to go and mingle a bit, and then some of us are going to go down. I booked a bit of a space down at the Boundary Hotel, and at the bottom area near the pizzeria. So if you want to come and have a soft drink or a drink or whatever and something to eat, we'll be down there. We can have a chat if you want to as well. And then Yellowstone was amazing. Do you remember what animal they brought back to Yellowstone? The wolf. Yeah, apex predator, made a massive difference. Yeah, and then there's the two that I know well because I visited them. If anyone wants to see the film I did with Karen. Where's Karen? Yeah, and Tom. That I'll send you that one, and that's about the community and how getting money into the hands of the local people is so important in a lot of conservation projects. Yep. Yeah.
Well, I was just going
Jenny.
to ask a question on that point. So
Yeah.
the Burrell trees are obviously wealthy, massive house on a 7-kilometre property.
Yeah.
So how many farmers are in that position? And so how do poorer farmers or less well-off farmers actually engage with this process?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I wouldn't be able to answer the details on that. What I do know is that the Burrells, I mean, they must have a bob or two because they just donated millions to some conservation project. That he's on the board. Is that the right word? He's on a committee for Rewilding England. So they'll give advice and assistance. And I think every farm will be different. I had a look on the website to just see, well, what else is there? And there was a farmer and he was organising tours and he had wild deer. I can't remember what else he had there. So they'll all be slightly different. But the key thing is, which is why this housing development is such a problem, they want to try and connect them up. That's the key to it. Yeah. Joanna, yeah.
Yeah, so just to ask that question, if the UK would have left the EU, the European Union has grants to help farmers change over from conventional farming and industrial farming to ecologic farming, which goes a bit further than organic farming. So they'll create wider corridors between land so birds can nest and insects can nest.
Yeah, yeah.
The changeover time is bridged by the EU, so they don't have any lots.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Europe's done a lot, and Europe's done a lot about putting wildlife bridges. These are major bridges over highways and railway lines so that animals can move. There's barely any in the UK. So Europe is way ahead on some of this stuff, you know. Brexit. Let's get stuck there. You go on.
Anyway, a quick question. At the beginning, you showed us the nightingale and the turtle dove.
Yeah.
Is there any information? Have these birds started to come back at the nest as well?
Absolutely. I did my research for that too, and I found out. I've got the figures here. Yeah, I think. What have I got? There are now 16 pairs of turtle doves in NEP, and for nightingales, they started off with habitats that nightingales could live in. There were 9. These are biologists who go in and assess the land and look out for what they are. In 2012, so they started in 2000 roughly. So 12 years later, they had 34 territories for nightingales, and 79% of them were pairs. And 2013, there were 42 pairs of nightingales in there. So they've got something like 2% of all the nightingales, all in that little farm. Imagine what they could do if they connected up with other areas, you know. Yeah. I've got a feeling we've got to round it off there.
We do have to wrap it up, and I know there are more questions in the audience, and there are definitely more questions from Zoom, but what I might do is send them along to you afterwards.
Great.
And you can answer those to the Zoom people. It has been absolutely fascinating listening to this, and you did really well with the technology. I was very surprised, incredibly surprised.
Gary's here. I said I could point him out. He's our bird watching man for it. So if you want to see Gary at any time about the bird watching, and Susie is from Extinction Rebellion, which started in the UK and is very big in the UK. So she's done a huge amount of work with them. Against,
join me on the street.
Yeah, she's absolutely adored by the Courier Mail, by the way. And I'm trying not to forget anyone. There was somebody else I needed to. That's right, Sarah. Thank you, reminded me. I've got the list down there. Sarah is there, and Sarah's been working on revegetation around West End and around this area for 25 years.
And there's other people.
Yeah, and other people. Yeah, absolutely. But the other thing is we went there, and I'll tell you, for mental health, you can see why wilderness is so important. We go there. I've never felt better than doing tree planting on a Sunday. So it's great. We should get, that's the thing, we should get everyone to plant at least one tree. All the children, everyone should plant at least one tree in their life. Okay, any other questions? No, so you can see those people.
I think we do have to wrap up there, but it sounds like there's a couple of options for people. Do watch out for the cords, because they are going to trip you up. There are a couple of options for the people that are here, which is we're going to mingle. You can mingle for another 15 minutes, 20 minutes here, and then heading down the road to the boundary.
The boundary, yeah. So we're going down the boundary, and I've booked a space down there so we can have a little mill around and have a.
Great. I'm very sorry to the people on Zoom that you can't have a drink with us, but you can email us questions and we'll send them on to Ed so that he can answer you.
Oh, I know Yumi. Oh, Yumi, how are you? Mel, how are you?
I'll make it the view.
Yeah.
I'll do the gallery.
And I
Here we
think
go.
some of
There they are.
my
Some of them are gone already, but there you
Oh,
go.
look at
Lovely.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to say goodbye to everyone on Zoom. Bye. See you later.
Yeah.
Great.